Welcome to Total Health with Dr. Cheryl. Today I have a very special guest. He's an Ashaya monk and he's got a very important message for you. Let's welcome Vishnu. Hi, Vishnu.
Hey, Dr. Cheryl, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Now you have a very unusual name. What does Vishnu mean?
Vishnu's name is given to me by my teacher, and in the Hindu and Vedic tradition, he's one of the three main gods who actually stands between Shiva and Brahma. Brahma is the creator, and Vishnu is and Shiva is the destroyer, and Vishnu is the preserver or the balancer or the maintainer. Keep these two doing what they need to do without blowing up everything. So
that's always a good thing, yeah, to maintain between creation and destruction.
Exactly.
Great. Let's see if we can maintain today.
Great, I'll try.
Now, I heard that you wrote a book, but maybe you call it a bookmark. What is it that you have written?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I wrote a book, two of them actually. One is called The Power of Personal Punctuation.
That's a lot of P's.
It's a lot of P's, and I was criticized because it was too many words. I think there's less than 50. So I took it from book status to bookmark status because there are a lot of really wonderful books written by other Ashaya monks.
Uh-huh.
So I don't want to cast a pall on that, but for me, the personal punctuation was a very short statement about how to keep things simple, basically.
Okay, so what's behind that?
Well, the tradition that I meditate under is a very, very simple and easy, straightforward practice. Been around for a number of years. But what I found out is when I started to study this, I became a teacher. And what I realized was that, and actually, if you want to check this out, if you Google thoughts per day, the number of thoughts per day range from 3,000 to 70, 80 plus thousand thoughts a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. There's a big difference.
At least one a second, right?
At least that. If you do that over the years and you hit age 30, 40, 50, 60, that's a lot of thoughts running around inside your head.
Wow, yeah. I can identify with that.
Me too. I could then. I think I've got it down to something under 1,000. We'll see. But in the process of doing this, looking at Googling the thoughts per day, one of the things that came up was there was different numbers, got that. But everyone seemed to agree that the number of thoughts per day, whether it was 3 or 8 or whatever the number was, that a good portion of them, almost 90%, were repetitious, and of that, over 90% were negative. So is any wonder that there's all this clanging and noise going on all the time in people's heads? Personally, I think the number 80,000 is low because a lot of these studies were done before the computer and social media and the fact that you can carry glasses that can give you direct, all the things that we're now subject to that weren't around 5 years ago.
Wow.
So I think the thoughts per day is, all the imprints we get from thoughts are much higher than 80,000. But I'll go with what Google says for now.
But still, what do you do with all those thoughts? I mean, aren't we kind of just at the whim of those thoughts where we're dragged into these emotions and all the negativity?
Well, no one, in all the reading I've done about thoughts per day, no one ever talks about where they go.
Right. So where do they go?
Just that same constant repetitious flow of thoughts. And I don't think there's any way to get rid of the thoughts, and I'm not suggesting that as a meditation practice. But I think we can, with a number of different meditation practices, I think we can disconnect from the impact of these words. And again, it's never the words that cause issue for anybody. It's what we attach the thoughts, what we think they mean. And for example, I've got a headache. And a headache, that's it. That's not a big deal. And that's where personal punctuation comes. I have a headache, period. That's not the trick. The trick is what comes after that.
Uh-huh.
I have a headache. So what does that mean about me? Not drinking enough water, not doing this, and on the story we create to justify or explain. The fact is, really, you just have a headache. Now you might know some things you can do, take an aspirin, drink some water, whatever. But for most people, when they start having the thought and they have that one negative thought, it just starts to spiral. Uh-huh. There's nothing negative about I have a headache. It's the truth. It's a fact.
Right.
You start telling all the stories of why you have the headache. Before you know it, you've gone past the period. You have a sentence, then a paragraph, then a book, and then an encyclopedia. It's been a half hour and your headache's not any better and you're getting more worked up. So personal punctuation is written to say, look, when you recognize that you've had a thought, I feel sleepy, I feel this, period, stop. That's it, time out. You don't need to go any further than that. Why do you care? Why? Especially if you start going back into history. You know, I have a history of family headaches, and those were caused by my father who did this, and on and on.
Right, right. So there's a story attached to whatever sensation you're having, whether it's something in your body or some thought that you had. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you've had enough of those kind of thoughts, whether it's around pain or work or any issue that creates that kind of downward spiraling thinking, again, not thoughts, the thinking part, the part that really gets us wound up, it becomes debilitating. I mean, look at what prescriptions of the top 25 prescriptions have to do with depression, sleep, all the things that all that activity in your head can create at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I see patients with those kind of issues, and I recognize it thoroughly that our mental state is creating problems in our body.
Right.
And sometimes the first place to look is at our mental state.
Well, I think there's been a real shift, and you know this better than most, into what people think controls what. The mind controls the body, body controls the mind, when in fact they're in a great partnership.
Yeah, both.
You allow them to do what they both are there to do, then life's pretty grand. But when thinking becomes such a predominant activity,
Yeah.
body's gets precarious.
Right. So shall we take a look at your book? What is the personal punctuation here?
Okay, well, if you look at the way the book's written, and again, I think we're under 50 words. If you go to the left of the period, I've had the thought, period, that keeps you present, it keeps you at peace, and it keeps you in a centered place. Because in and of itself, a thought is just a thought. But if we start to do what I described earlier as the thinking part, because thoughts are repetitious and negative, 90% plus, that's got to be something in our past or future. It's definitely not about our present. Because if you have a thought in the present moment, it's just that thought. But if you go into past thinking, future thinking, it becomes chaotic and stressful because you have, if I asked you what you had for breakfast this morning, you could probably tell me pretty clearly. If I asked you what you had for breakfast a month ago, I think it's going to be a little foggier unless you have the same thing every day, 7 days a week. So I had an interesting experiment with my brother. He and I were at a dinner party with my parents years ago. It was a pretty momentous occasion. And we could both describe everything going on in that room, the colors, the furniture, everything. But when it came to describing what my parents were doing or talking about, we were like we're two different places at the same time. So when you start thinking and start bringing in the past or future that doesn't even exist, now you're playing in an area that you have absolutely there's no truth to it. Or if the truth is there, it's very small.
Mm-hmm.
The personal punctuation says when you have a thought, great. Have the thought, just allow it to be that. And because we teach and do meditation, we have certain techniques, eyes open, eyes closed, that you can introduce at the time of the thought to keep you from going into thinking.
Perfect.
It just creates a space between the thought and what's going to follow historically for the thinker, if you will. So that was the basic thought behind this first book.
Yeah. So that is the power of personal punctuation, isn't it?
Keep it absolutely simple. Nothing inherently wrong with a thought. It's just a thought.
Right. Cool. So is there some kind of follow-up on that?
Well, as a matter of fact, after my first book, since it was so widely reviewed and people loved it, because you can take it anywhere and you can put it in as a bookmark, as I said.
Right.
There's a second book called Life Happens.
Okay.
Life always happens because in the middle of the thought, if you start to get really involved in it, you have a particular thought. You're always going to have thoughts. There's no way to escape it. There's no way to do it. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But you also have a choice. Mm-hmm. The choice is either to go down the path of taking the thought to lots of thinking, and everyone knows where that goes, or to make a different choice. And that choice is to use the power of personal punctuation. That at any given moment that you can introduce, I'm done. I'm just going to take this thought for what it is, face value, no judgment, no history, no past, no future. It's just this thought. If you look on page 2 of the book, I get a little wordier in the second book than the first.
Yeah. Look, the pages are even bigger.
That's more for my eyesight than anything else. So under life happens, always happens, you have the options. And to the left of the period, you can allow the thought to be, you can just trust that it's just a thought. You can revel in the peace that it's created in that moment and stay present. Or you can do what we typically do, is to struggle with the 50, 60, 70, 80,000 thoughts a day, which is lots of thinking, creates lots of stress and pressure, and it keeps you everything out of the present moment exclusively. Because you can't do both. You can't be the present moment, you can't be the past and or the future. You've got to be one or the three.
Right.
So you get to choose at that moment, again, at the personal punctuation moment, that as life is happening, you can stay now and stay still, or you can go in the past or future and experience the chaos that most of us experience when we get into that thinking process. And I really like at the bottom of this page, this saying, the mind can mimic anything but quiet or stillness. The mind cannot mimic that. It can mimic emotions. That voice that says this is a better thing to do or a better way to do it, or really it's not. The mind can imitate anything, but it cannot imitate stillness. So both books were designed to keep things as simple as absolutely possible and to give people a place to go when the thinking becomes its chaotic best or worst, and when it becomes so distracting that all you can do is follow the thoughts. This gives you a simple way to disconnect from that spiral of negative thinking and repetitious thoughts.
Cool. So by putting that punctuation point, we have that power of making a choice. By stopping at the thought, we have the choice of not going and elaborating on thinking.
That's correct.
Great.
It also allows, and the thing about a meditation practice, whatever meditation you follow, is this the filler. Once you've recognized you've had the thought, once you're at the place saying, I have a headache, period, before the mind begins to say, yeah, but it starts to pull you away from the punctuation mark. Any meditation technique that will get you to quiet the mind, just create that space between the thought and the thinking that's coming.
Right.
Will give you that moment of quiet and silence. And in that moment, the mind and the body say, okay, there's an alternative here. I'm not slave to these thoughts, and I don't need to go to the 80,000. I mean, I'm going to have them anyway, but I don't need to attach to them and give them more value than they're just the thought. So
by making the choice to stop at the thought and not elaborate into a story, you are getting a little bit of peace.
Exactly. And the body will naturally start to relax. The body will start to relax. The mind begins to also start to get a little more peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sure as shooting, you're going to have another thought. Okay,
right.
Whatever got you past this, do it again. There's a repetitious part of any meditation practice that allows you to keep that disconnect of the rampant thinking in place.
Right.
That's the value of meditation. Mindful practice, meditation, whatever you want to call it, that gives you something to basically keep the thinking at bay, give you a space.
And I love how simple this is, how you just simply observe what's going on through your mind. And when you notice that it's a thought, you simply use your power of the punctuation point and just stop and don't go on. And of course, like you mentioned, you usually have to do that over and over again, but it's like any training that we do. We get stronger and stronger in it the more we do it.
Right. I'm sure you find in your practice that the more people follow simple guidelines, the more embedded it becomes in their day-to-day life. And that's all meditation is. You embed that in your life. It gets there at that personal punctuation and gives you an alternative to chasing 80,000 thoughts a day.
Great. So what can my listeners do to get a hold of this book?
Well, I'm going to send you a copy of it, and perhaps they could come to you and ask you to send them a copy, or
Yeah, I'll be able to have it in a place where they can be downloaded so
Great.
that they can have their own personal punctuation and their own choice, to remind them of their choice. Do they want peace or do they want chaos?
right. This is such a gentle approach to the chaos that modern day life creates for all of us. So,
Great. What parting words do you have?
oh, that's easy. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. The thoughts are going to keep coming. Just find a simple way to give yourself the opportunity to balance all those thoughts with a little bit of silence and a bit of quiet. So keep
Great.
it simple.
Now, I talk about this kind of thing on other videos and articles on my app, but it's really refreshing to have somebody, even somebody named Vishnu, come and talk about how simple it is for him, for us to actually learn this, put in the period, and don't go on. Thank you for joining us today, Vishnu.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Cheryl.
You're welcome.
As we say where I come from, aloha and thank you.
Aloha.